The EV bandwagon represents a clear present danger to the Western car industry. The EV has been a political scam from the globalist neocons trying a wag the dog strategy. When JP Morgan and BlackRock have been investing billions in fossil fuel, you can be sure that EV has no chance to succeed in the coming 100 years unless a new energy brought by the extraterrestrials and accepted by the cabal governing our world. No free energy and no free lunch. The electric vehicle, EV, revolution has been heavily promoted as a key to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, a step toward green future, and a centerpiece of the modern environmental movement. Politicians and activists alike tout EVs as the saviors of the planet, painting them as a cornerstone of sustainable policy. However, beneath the optimistic claims lies a set of hard truths. The global infrastructure is far from prepared to handle the electricity demand that widespread EV adoption would entail, particularly when taking into account the additional strains from emerging technology sectors such as artificial intelligence, AI. The realities of EV manufacturing and energy production reveal that EVs are not as green as they appear. Given that a large portion of the world's electricity is still generated by coal and nuclear power, the notion of EVs as a sustainable alternative may be more political hype than environmental salvation. 1. The electricity demand problem. As EV adoption grows, so does the demand for electricity. The assumption that EVs will fit seamlessly into the existing grid is not realistic. Generating the level of electricity needed to power millions of EVs across Europe, the United States, and other global markets would require unprecedented levels of production. Even without the additional demand from EVs, many countries are struggling to maintain adequate power supplies, with some experiencing frequent blackouts. Integrating millions of EVs into the grid will only intensify these issues. Furthermore, the AI industry's growing demand for energy, driven by data centers and the computational power required to develop advanced machine learning systems, will place additional strain on an already overburdened grid. With energy demand skyrocketing, the idea of EVs as the future of transportation begins to seem less feasible. 2. The inconvenient reality of green energy sources. Even if EVs produce no tailpipe emissions, the process of generating the electricity to charge them often relies on coal, natural gas, and nuclear power. While renewable energy sources like wind and solar are expanding, they currently provide only a small fraction of global electricity needs and come with limitations of their own. Wind and solar power are intermittent, meaning they are not always available when demand is high. This means that, in reality, much of the energy charging EVs comes from traditional, non-renewable sources that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. In countries like Germany and Poland, where coal is a significant energy source, EVs charged on the grid may have a carbon footprint similar to that of a fuel-efficient gasoline car. 3. The unsustainable hype around EVs. The allure of EVs has grown in part because they align well with political goals and the green branding associated with modern environmentalism. For many governments, promoting EVs has been a way to signal progress without fully grappling with the difficult reality of building a sustainable infrastructure to support them. Many EV proponents fail to acknowledge the environmental costs associated with manufacturing, such as the mining and processing of lithium, cobalt, and nickel for batteries. These processes can result in significant environmental degradation, water consumption, and pollution, often affecting poorer communities that have little say in the extraction of their local resources. 4. The economic risks to European and global markets. Italy and the EU, by heavily investing in the EV market, risk economic losses in their automotive sectors. Chinese car manufacturers have already gained an edge in producing affordable EVs, which are flooding the market and undermining European competitiveness. Europe's car industry, long a staple of the EU economy, has already shown signs of financial strain, and the additional push toward EVs may only deepen its troubles. If global attitudes toward EVs shift, or if the environmental benefits of EVs continue to be scrutinized, the EU may find itself overinvested in an unsustainable market. 5. Reassessing the green path forward. The green movement, though noble in its aims, risks veering into greenwashing territory by presenting EVs as a perfect solution without acknowledging their complexities. Leaders and activists need to address the broader issue of sustainable energy infrastructure rather than assuming that simply swapping out combustion engines for batteries will solve climate change. A sustainable future will likely require a diversified approach, one that balances the advantages of EVs with the exploration of alternative fuels, improved energy storage, and perhaps more efficient forms of public transportation. Conclusion: the need for a wake-up call. At its core, the blind push toward EVs represents a disconnect between environmental ideals and practical realities. The infrastructure to support millions of EVs does not yet exist, and the global energy sector, still dominated by coal and nuclear power, does not align with the ideals of green energy. Leaders must recognize that while EVs offer some benefits, they are not a one-size-fits-all solution to environmental issues. Without a realistic, sustainable approach to energy production and consumption, the EV hype may ultimately serve as more of a distraction than a solution. In the end, what is needed is a critical reassessment of priorities, one that avoids the pitfalls of political enthusiasm at the expense of realistic and effective action. AI and energy demand. Remarkably, the computational power required for sustaining AI's rise is doubling roughly every 100 days. To achieve a tenfold improvement in AI model efficiency, the computational power demand could surge by up to 10,000 times. The energy required to run AI tasks is already accelerating with an annual growth rate between 26% and 36%. This means by 2028, AI could be using more power than the entire country of Iceland used in 2021. The perceived superiority of China in the EV industry could ultimately backfire if the United States and the EU were to pivot away from aggressive EV targets. If these targets were reconsidered or scrapped, particularly in light of the mounting electricity shortfall and the comparative affordability of fossil fuels, China's competitive edge in EV production might become a liability rather than an asset. The global energy crisis and increasing costs associated with electricity production highlight a critical issue. Current energy infrastructure may not be able to sustainably support a fully electrified transport system, especially given the added energy demands of emerging technologies like AI. In many parts of the world, there remains a significant amount of cheaper, more readily available fossil fuel that can support conventional combustion engines without the need for massive infrastructure investments. The affordability and abundance of fossil fuels could incentivize countries to retain or even expand their traditional automotive sectors rather than continuing the push for electrification, particularly if the costs of renewable energy do not decrease rapidly enough to make EVs an economically viable choice for the masses. Should global leaders recognize the unsustainable strain that EVs place on electricity grids and the environmental trade-offs in mining for battery components, they may choose to relax or abandon EV mandates. This shift would expose China's vast investments in EV manufacturing to significant financial risk. The US and EU could end up focusing on improving the efficiency and emissions standards of traditional vehicles or exploring alternative fuels, effectively leaving China with a surplus of EVs and manufacturing capacity without a global market to absorb them. In this scenario, China's current dominance in the EV industry could turn into a disadvantage as the demand for EVs falls short of expectations. This outcome could not only challenge China's economic positioning, but also highlight the need for diversified energy strategies worldwide. It underscores that a successful transition to greener technologies requires balanced planning, including realistic energy assessments and diversified fuel strategies, rather than a single-minded push toward EVs that may ultimately prove unsustainable.